Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Crime Centric. This thing is a show where I talk about crime dramas that I like. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about person of interest. Now, in this week's episode, we had the team dealing with a new number. It's this guy named Garvin. He basically works with the police. He basically, there's a system that kind of recognizes, gunfire. When it gets called about gunfire, and basically, it's a system that determines whether or not it's like, okay, well, Garvin kind of does this himself, but there's like an automatic system too to decide whether something's like actual gunfire or whether it's like, oh, fireworks going off or like a car, I forgot what the term is, when a car goes off and it kind of like sounds like shots being fired. And he kind of has an ear for it, and it's up to him to kind of determine whether or not that's the case. Well, essentially, his number gets brought up because he's looking into a college student. This girl kind of disappeared. Later on, you end up finding out the reason why he's associated with her is because he knew her back in high school. I mean, he talked about the fact that he kind of didn't like her. She was too much of a kiss ass back in the day and stuff like that. But essentially, because of his good hearing, he was able to tell, like, oh, like there's a like the system reported it as just like, oh, it was fireworks going off or something like that. But he listened to it and he has good ears. It's just kind of a talent of his. And he was able to recognize like, oh, it's actually gunshots. But the system registered it as fireworks. So essentially the system was wrong about something. It kind of did a bit of a cover. So basically he wanted to kind of investigate it. And, him and John worked together to investigate. I mean, obviously you got Fusco investigating it too, obviously. But it ended with a very interesting situation because we ended up finding out that basically it all ended up coming back to that particular student disappearing, her research being what's involved. Essentially, there was a guy from he's done some shady stuff, stuff in the past that basically to get his way, and this particular student, her research was very valuable to him, but she went to some other company with it. So, but he was being set up as like, all this information was set up to make it look like it was him behind it, because it's like, oh, he's done stuff like this in the past. So it's like, so obviously he's come here to the U.S. Here in New York, he's doing it again. So, but it was like they ended up looking into it. Harold and Rue ended up looking into it and ended up finding out like, oh no, the reason why this is all set up like this is because it's Samaritan setting this whole thing up. That's why the computer system, because they were looking at like, oh, this huge cover up as well as this hacking ability, like not leaving any trails and stuff like that. It's Samaritan. That's why it was covering up that lady disappearing, because they didn't want to, raise any red flags. And that's kind of like them dealing with it, because they ended up not finding out what the information was on it. I can only assume because Harold wanted to find out, like, what was Samaritan so keen on? Like, why did Samaritan want that research so badly? Obviously, I can only chalk it up to it had some kind of, like, weakness, like some kind of information on it. It was kind of a, weakness that it could be exploited to take down Samaritan or something. I don't know. But Root was kind of like, basically, we, publish it, on all these sites, because it's like, the only reason why Samaritan is going after him is because Samaritan believes him to be a danger to everyone else. I mean, because he has the potential of finding it. He's kind of the last link in the chain, but by releasing it, it minimizes his, threat level, because it's like, okay, he's no longer a threat. That's kind of the last we see him in the I mean, obviously, but it's like, I feel like he's going to come back in some regard, because he has very good hearing, because basically he was talking about the fact is he heard something is like someone's there. It's like it's a little bit of a superhero, because he's got some really good hearing, because he's able to tell what type of gun it is just by the sound of it. Just like I said, kind of a special ability or whatever. But that was kind of a very interesting regard. Like I said, that's the only thing I can chalk that up to, is that the reason why Samaritan was so afraid of that was because it was like there was something deeper inside. Like there was something inside that research that it just either it needed or feared, the reason why it was going after it so hard. But Harold was like, we missed our chance to kind of find out what that was. There was I did like the situation where it's basically like Reese had disappeared and everyone was under the impression Samaritan had him, and you kind of actually saw Root was actually seriously scared, because she's like, it's happening all over again. It's the Shaw situation happening over again. So I'm like, no. Okay, Reese has disappeared. It hasn't been that long since he just disappeared, so the trail isn't cold. And obviously I was like, it's not Samaritan. When they said like our boss wants to see you, I was like, that's not Samaritan. Because basically in this episode, the other big part of this episode is there's that guy we met last season. We kind of got introduced to when after Anthony Elias's kind of right hand man ended up dying, getting killed. Well, I mean that whole regard and that whole Dominic situation. He ended up meeting up with this guy because this guy basically, he's like, Elias is like a brother to him. He was looking to the whole, he went to Fusco and was basically kind of threatening his kid, being like, tell me the truth about this whole situation with Elias. And Fusco's like, you better back away from it. It's like all in my report because Fusco's trying to keep it hush hush. To me, I tried it. I was like, okay, because Fusco's like, because Fusco was told by John to just let it go, like that whole situation, because Fusco wanted to look into it, but he was kind of told just to let it go. But then in regards to that, like we ended up having him and John talk later on, and John's kind of telling him like to let it go, telling that Elias's ally to just let it go. He's like, Elias is dead, and it's like me and my men, we need to get retribution for him. And it ended up being that he's like, you can't just take it as a loss. But he's like, if you ever go near Fusco again, I will kill you personally. I was just like, wow, John, I didn't know you cared so much. That was nice. But in that regard, like, I mean, I was like, the moment he said the boss, I was like, yeah, he ended up getting kidnapped. But the real nice twist that I like in the episode is we end up finding out freaking Elias is alive, which I like. I love it because like Elias is one of my favorite characters in the show. Just how calm, cool, and calculating he is. It's just like, to me, because he's one of those bad guys. Like I said, him and Dominic had very similar introductions, as in like, well, in Elias's regard, you didn't, I think I've talked about this before, in Elias's regard, it's like he started off as like a teacher, so you didn't really expect, and he ended up turning out to be this like big time mob boss, which we ended up finding out in this episode. It's not just Elias and Dominic that were taken out. There were other bosses of like Jersey and Philly. There's like a lot of mob bosses being taken out. Which can only be chalked up to Samaritan. But even Elias, apparently Fusco pulled him out. So Fusco's known this entire time that Elias is still alive. They all three, like him, John, and Harold, have kept this kind of thing hush hush, kind of keeping him hidden away. And Elias is telling him to kind of back away. This is an enemy that they can't fight. Without kind of going into too much detail, it makes you wonder just how much did Harold and John kind of fill him in about what's going on here. But he kind of gets it because he's like, this is an enemy we can't be. He's like, but his friend's like, I've never run away from a fight before. We've never run away from a fight. He's like, go back to the shadows. He's like, kind of like, I can't do that. And Elias is like, just be careful. And he's just like, yeah. And so at the end of the episode, we see him walking away, and we see like Samaritan's kind of kept an eye on him because he is becoming kind of it seems, well, I mean, obviously it could be just Samaritan keeping eyes on everything, but he did have a hat on, so maybe it hasn't seen his face. But, sooner or later, it does seem like, Samaritan is keeping his eye on it. And is keeping his eye on Fusco, which I did like. The fact is, when John went missing, that Fusco was like, nah, we won't no, my partner's missing. Missing. He's like going like crazy. It's like, oh, like he's very passionate about it. He's like, he's not, I mean, because let's not, he already lost one partner, Carter. So it's like, he's not about to lose another partner. So, I mean, he was scared in that situation. But at the end of it, John was telling him to kind of, can we talk about this some other time about what's going on? But like, because basically this missing persons case wasn't dealt with because, we caught some of the people that were involved in her, like, the lady disappearing as well as that girl that died this episode. In those both regards, the one is connected to this whole cover up, and Fusco's going to look into it because he's like the guy that looks good for this whole situation. The girl dying, that girl going missing. Even Fusco is like, it don't seem right. I don't think he's the one that's behind this. And John, he's like, you and Harold kind of probably already know that too. You kind of got that feeling too. And John telling him to let it go, but Fusco's not. So like, Samaritan's going to come after him, and it's just like. In some regards, you kind of wish that John and Harold would finally fill him in on this whole situation. But it's like Fusco's going to get himself in a lot of trouble with this. Like, I mean, he's going to get himself killed, if not him and his son. And it's just like, oh boy, it's just I don't know what's going to happen in that regard. And on another final note about this episode is we have Harold essentially set up. He took the setup that Root did. What was that? Like 2 episodes ago, where basically she set up that little malware of Samaritan on a like closed off computer. She's basically like, we have to study it because we have to do whatever it takes to kind of win this war. And Carol's kind of keeping that in mind. So basically, he kind of copied a bit of Samaritan's own code onto that, onto that computer to kind of basically wanted the virus to kind of break it down. So basically he ends up setting up a simulation network, essentially. Network's probably not the right word, but he sets up a simulation, a virtual simulation room to basically have the machine and this little tiny bit of Samaritan to go head to head, to kind of see, basically using that malware to kind of help the machine kind of like decipher any way of kind of exploiting any weaknesses to the to Samaritan to kind of give them an upper hand. But things kind of don't look good in that regards. I mean, we have like Root saying like, you need to like arm the machine, let her get more prepared. In a regard, she kind of treats it kind of like a school bully situation. Like, the machine is being bullied. You got to teach the machine to kind of push back. And that regard ended with, Harold being like, no, we can't do that. I'm not going to. It's like, that's not a mentality we should be like. That's to like push back, to kind of be a little aggressive, isn't something that we should be pushing towards the machine. But it's like, we have to win this war. Like, you're kind of handicapping the machine in that regard. But he's kind of like, the machine is a super intelligent AI being. We shouldn't have to like, we shouldn't be teaching it something kind of as aggressive as that. That basically, if the machine needs to change, the only one that, in this regard, that has a right to kind of change it. Like, if the machine feels that it needs to change to better itself in a situation, it's up to the machine to decide to change it. It's kind of like, how you send your child out there to kind of fend for themselves, that like basically they got to learn how to handle situations on their own in these regards. I guess it's kind of like that's what Harold's kind of putting the machine in that situation, where it's like, if the machine really feels like it needs to really give itself the upper hand, it's the only one that's going to be the one that kind of modifies itself, that changes itself to adapt to the situation. But basically things are not looking good. Basically over, like it said, like over 10, even Harold said it himself, like over 10 billion simulations, because it was like running through them really fast, obviously, and the machine has not won a single bout. And it's just like, that does not look good. They're essentially in a losing war. And also in this episode, we met the guy from, was that the second episode? The guy, basically the machine had given them their number, but they kind of didn't really give it any regards. They thought it was just part of the machine glitching. It was the guy that we saw get kind of recruited by Samaritan, which interestingly enough, like, he is recruited and he's being told what to do, but it's like, basically he went after that. He doesn't know any of like the dirty work, like the girl going missing or the girl getting killed. He doesn't even know about Samaritan or the machine or John and them. So like, he's 100% in the dark. He's there to do a little legwork, but his legwork is kept to an extreme. Like, he's kept a lot in the dark because he doesn't know about what's going on. Granted, Root filled him in on it a little bit, but it's like, she's like, eventually they are going to cross paths at some point again. And it's like, it makes you wonder under what regards, because he doesn't seem like a bad guy. He just took the job because it was like the only job he could get. Like, he needed, more money and stuff like that. So that's the only reason why he took that job. And it's just because John and them weren't able to, because they thought the machine was just glitching, so they didn't really realize that he was someone that needed their help. So really interesting to see where this goes. I feel like, personally, I thought that whole because that guy was told that research information was actually something dangerous. So it is probably something dangerous to the Samaritan. But I thought it was going to be something like, what I thought was going to happen was Harold was going to get the ideas like, hey, why don't we give this information to the machine and see what it does with it? Ends up finding out, but that's not what ended up happening. So it's like, once again, it's like, hopefully we do end up finding out soon, like, why Samaritan was so dead set on getting that information, and like how, like, will there, because I was thinking like, maybe like that would ended up changing the tide in that simulation, kind of prove like, oh, and here's like, with this added research, we end up finding the one simulation that the machine has created where we win. So it's just like, it's not looking good on the battlefront. So, but like I said, that's it that I really kind of want to talk about. But till the next time, we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and goodbye.